The land burned. Black cliffs howled under endless winds. Ash storms churned like rolling oceans across the sky, and the very earth wept blood as the warp screamed through every crack and fissure. In the heart of this hellscape, two forces of the Adeptus Astartes fought as one. The space wolves had come for the hunt. The salamanders had come for the cleansing flame. Together, they brought the Emperor's wrath. Bolt rounds thundered across a ruined cathedral of flesh and stone. The air shimmered with sorcery and blood. Howling mutants charged with rusted blades, but they were cut down by emerald fire and crackling frost. "Bring it down," shouted Brother Thane Hulric of the Space Wolves, his voice a gravel roar over the vox. He drove his frost axe into the neck of a warp-born monstrosity the size of a rhino, wrenching the blade free as burning ichor sprayed across his ceramite. Beside him, Brother Varan of the Salamanders stepped forward, expression solemn as he levelled his multi-melter. A flash of incandescent energy lit the dusk, and the creature's torso vaporized into molten mist. "Cleanse it all," Varan said. "By Vulcan's will, not one heretic breathes." Above, thunderhawks shrieked across a churning sky. A dozen drop pods still burned in the distance. They had come to destroy the final bastion of the demon prince Kerax, a monster who had eluded judgment for a century. They had found him. He descended like a meteor, wings spread wide, trailing chains of shrieking demon fire. His arrival split the clouds. Kerax landed in the ruined plaza, slamming into the cracked stone, sending salamanders and wolves flying. He bellowed something in the dark tongue, and the air itself became a weapon. The warp screamed. But the Space Marines did not break. They attacked as one, blade and flame, gun and fang. Varan rallied his brothers. "Shield the Psykers. Keep pressure. Fire in ranks." Rune Priest Mjor Skybreaker stepped forward from the Space Wolf line, chanting in Fenrisian as his hand blazed with runes. Lightning arced from his palm, spearing the demon across the chest. The creature staggered, howled, and then the heavens answered. A rupture tore through reality, not from the warp, not from the sky. A hole, a spiraling, burning void of unknown origin. Reality bent, colours collapsed into one another, and the stars themselves screamed. It swallowed them. One moment they were fighting a demon, the next they were gone. Silence. The strike cruiser Pyre Howl snapped into being amid a field of stars it did not recognize. Proximity alarms howled. Auspex readings scrambled. Nearby, 2 drop pods and a Storm Talon gunship blinked into existence, trailing smoke. On the bridge, Captain Carthan of the Salamanders stared at the view screen. "What is this?" he muttered. Runes flickered red across every console. The Geller field was down. Astropathic communication dead. The stars were wrong. The warp echo around them, absent. "We're not in the Imperium," said a voice beside him. It was Hulric, battered and bloodied, flanked by 2 growling space wolves. I can feel it in my bones. Outside, the world below turned slowly. A forested moon, brimming with life, yet strange. Unknown satellites orbited it. One of them twisted, changed direction, an imperial-looking ship, but wrong. Too sleek, too clean. Something's watching us, muttered Varan, and it's not the warp. The drop pods struck the ground like thunderbolts. Soil burst skyward. The salamanders moved first, methodical, forming a perimeter. Their armour, deep green and scarred from flame, glinted under Endor's twin moons. The space wolves emerged from the tree line, fangs bared, sniffing the air. Alien soil, said Ulrich, kneeling and running dirt between his fingers. But not chaos. Not yet. The Vox crackled. Unidentified units, surrender your weapons and power down, by order of the Empire. The Marines turned. Stormtroopers, dozens of them. They marched from the shadows, blasters raised. Their white armor gleamed, soulless and uniform. Behind them, a hovering scout tank and an AT-ST walker approached, weapons trained. One stepped forward. You are trespassing in restricted territory. In the name of the Emperor. Ulrich laughed, a harsh, animal sound. You speak of the Emperor, he growled. You pale dolls think you serve him. I see no Aquila on your armor. I see no faith in your step. Last warning. Varan stepped forward, raising a hand. We are not your enemies, Varan said, his voice calm, deep, echoing through the trees like a judge passing sentence. His emerald armor hissed as internal systems recalibrated. The twin-headed drake sigil on his shoulder glinted in the light. But raise your weapons against the Emperor's chosen, and you will burn. The lead stormtrooper hesitated, a flicker of human doubt. But protocol won. He gestured sharply. Open fire. The forest erupted into chaos. Red blaster bolts screamed through the night. Trees exploded into splinters. Leaves burst into flame. But the Astartes stood tall, unmoved. They advanced like demigods. The salamanders marched forward in a disciplined wedge, bolt rifles rising in perfect synchrony. A wall of incandescent flame roared from their heavy flamers, washing over the nearest squad of stormtroopers. Screams cut through the forest, bodies flailing, armor melting, white plastoid fusing with charred flesh. Brother Varan's bolter kicked like thunder. Each shot was a mass reactive judgment. One round took a stormtrooper clean through the chest, detonating his torso in a fountain of bone and pink fire. Another blast tore off a leg, sending the trooper spinning mid-air like a broken puppet before slamming into a tree with a wet crack. From the left flank came a howl. Ulrich. The space wolf bounded from the shadows like a beast of Fenris, moving faster than any human could track. He tore through a line of troopers, frost axe flashing like lightning. The first had his helmet split clean in two. The second was decapitated, head spinning into the underbrush. The third tried to run. Ulrich tackled him into the dirt, driving his axe through the stormtrooper's spine, and let out a roar that echoed across the trees. An AT-ST walker stomped into view, blaster cannon swiveling. Too late. Ulrich vaulted up a tree trunk, pushed off mid-sprint, and slammed into the cockpit with the force of a drop pod. The viewport cracked under his weight. The pilot shouted, fumbling for his controls. The frost axe came down once. The viewport caved in. Blood sprayed across the inside glass like red mist on ice. For Russ, the wolves cried, charging in his wake. On the far side of the glade, A scout tank tried to reposition, its turret swinging, targeting systems locking on. A shriek of melter fire answered. Brother Garen of the Salamanders fired from the hip, the weapon glowing white-hot. The tank's frontal armor melted like wax, exposing the crew inside for the briefest of instants before a second shot turned them into shadows on the wall. The explosion lit the woods. Stormtroopers screamed and scattered, but there was no escape. They were prey, and the angels of death had found them. The killing lasted less than 2 minutes, then silence. Crackling fire danced in the branches. White armor, blackened and shattered, lay scattered in smouldering heaps. Trees burned. A single limb twitched, its owner long dead. Acrid smoke curled around the boots of the victors. Varan stepped through the wreckage. He removed his helmet. His face was lined, obsidian dark, marked by heat scars and duty. He looked down at a corpse half fused to a tree trunk, helmet melted into its skull. He spoke low and measured. This is not the Imperium. Ulrich emerged from the shadows, his armor splattered with gore, his axe humming with frost. He sniffed the air like a hunting wolf, then again snarled. No scent of the warp, no madness, no demonic rot. Just nothing. They're clean, he spat. They're empty, like children with plastic swords, pretending at war. A black-armored tech marine knelt beside a ruined comms array, his auspex glowing with script and static. A small hololith flickered to life, recorded chatter from the enemy. Intercepted their comms, the tech marine said grimly. They speak of an emperor, not ours. A mortal tyrant, commands legions of these puppets from a metal throne. Varan's jaw clenched. Another false god. He looked up, the rising moon casting a cold halo around his helm as he slid it back on. Then this galaxy has its own empire, a delusion of order built on ignorance. Ulrich growled, turning toward the horizon. We'll tear it down, brick by brick, bone by bone. Varan nodded. So begins the cleansing. Above them, on the Star Destroyer Merciless, an Imperial officer stared at the carnage report. 50 men, a scout walker, a tank. Gone. Play the footage, he said. The screen flickered to life. Flames, giants, green-armored juggernauts walking through fire. One, growling like a wolf as he tore through troopers. Get me Grand Moff Tarkin, the officer said quietly. The camera feed froze on the face of Ulrich. Tell him, we may have a new rebellion, and these ones aren't human. The forest still smouldered. Crimson light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the battlefield, littered with the shattered remnants of stormtroopers. Brother Captain Varan stood amid the ruin, bolter cradled in his arms, helmet clipped to his belt. Smoke curled from his armor. Around him, salamanders and space wolves regrouped, dragging wounded brothers from the underbrush, stomping out fires and reloading weapons. There was no time for reverence, no time to bury the dead. They were still being hunted. Then the ground trembled. A distant thud echoed through the trees. Another and another. Birds scattered from the canopy. Trees swayed. Branches snapped. Contact, growled Ulrich. stepping beside Varan, axe gleaming with dried blood. The thudding became thunder. From the tree line, the towering silhouette emerged. An AT-AT. The Imperial war machine's legs cracked trees like twigs. Its head swiveled, cannons lowering. Red lights blinked across its massive frame as stormtroopers marched beneath its belly. "Emperor's bones," muttered Brother Garoon. "The abominable intelligence of this realm builds giants." "We fought worse," Varan said grimly. "Hold positions. Bring it down." Too late. The AT-AT fired. A searing bolt of light lanced from its twin cannons. It struck Brother Malvek full in the chest. For a second, he stood defiant. Then his armor exploded. Green ceramite shattered. Flesh turned to ash. Nothing remained but a smouldering crater. "Malvek," someone screamed, but there was no time to mourn. "Disperse. Use the trees for cover," Varan barked. The Marines scattered. Another shot scorched the forest floor, setting the brush alight. Stormtroopers charged behind the walker, blasters firing in disciplined volleys. "Target the legs," Varan commanded. "Bring it down." Brother Garoon knelt behind a rock outcrop, his melter gun glowing. He fired, and a stream of superheated death splashed against one of the AT-AT's legs. The armor blackened, but held. "It's too thick," he roared. "Then weaken the joints," Ulrich snarled. He leapt between trees, bounding from cover to cover, frost-axe raised. He found a foothold near the walker's rearmost leg and swung. Metal screeched under the force of the impact, hydraulic fluid spraying like blood. Another Marine, Brother Tormek, slid a rocket launcher from his back. "I have a shot," he said. "Clear the line." "Fire!" Varan roared. The rocket screamed through the trees, trailing smoke. It struck the AT-AT's front right leg. Direct hit. The leg buckled, sparks spraying. The walker shifted, unbalanced. Again, "Bring the beast down." A second rocket was launched. This time it struck the rear leg Ulrich had damaged. This time, the limb snapped. The AT-AT lurched. It twisted, struggled. Then gravity took hold. The giant machine groaned as it tipped forward. Trees shattered beneath its bulk. Its head crashed into the forest floor with a colossal boom, fire belching from the impact point. The stormtroopers underneath were crushed instantly. For a moment, silence. Then a cheer rose from the Marines. Fists slammed against armor. A space wolf howled in triumph. "The beast falls," Ulrich roared. But the celebration was cut short. "Captain," the Tech Marine's voice crackled. "Look to the heavens." Varan turned. Above them, the clouds glowed red. Lines of fire raked the sky. Turbo laser beams streaked through the upper atmosphere. From orbit, the heavens burned. The Hammer of Nocturne, the venerable Space Marine strike cruiser, hung in the black void above the alien world. Her hull bore the battle scars of centuries, layered with green and black ceramite plating and engraved with runes of fire and honor. But now, she was bleeding flame and venting atmosphere. 3 Imperial Star Destroyers bore down upon her, each one over a mile in length, shaped like jagged white spears of death. Their massive ventral turbo laser batteries opened fire in punishing salvos, slamming into the Hammer's void shields with relentless fury. Each Star Destroyer carried over 60 turbo laser emplacements and dozens of ion cannons, designed to subdue and erase capital ships. The Hammer returned fire with her dorsal lance batteries and prow-mounted plasma torpedoes, her tech adept chanting in Nocturnian as fire spat from her hull. One lance beam carved a burning gash across the nearest Star Destroyer's shields, but it wasn't enough. Their shield harmonics recovered almost instantly. "Shields collapsing," shouted the bridge serf, sparks cascading from a blown-out cogitator. Brother Commander Kador stood at the command eye, cloak scorched, helm retracted. His eyes locked on the tactical display as 3 overlapping red spheres closed around them. "Concentrate return fire. Focus all lances on their port flank. Burn a hole if we must," he bellowed. But the Hammer shook again as a trio of green ion blasts overloaded the forward plasma conduits. Explosions gutted Deck 8. The viewing port cracked. Hull breaches on Decks 6 through 12, fire and engineering, warp core containment collapsing. The main cogitator chimed once, then went dark. Kador slammed his gauntlet onto the command rail. "All hands, abandon ship. Deploy drop pods. Save who we can." Klaxons screamed across the decks. Servo arms opened the drop pod bays like iron petals. Black adamantium capsules launched from the hull, each filled with squads of Astartes. Like flaming meteors, they tore through the atmosphere toward the surface below. As the last pods launched, the Hammer's engines flickered and died. A series of chained explosions tore through her spine. The once glorious strike cruiser cracked apart as her plasma core overloaded. In one blinding, sun-hot flash, she was gone. Varan stood amid the smoking ruins of the forest clearing. His eyes were fixed on the darkening sky. Drop pods continued to fall like wrathful comets, some trailing smoke, some burning, some veering off course before vanishing into the distant horizon. One slammed into a tree line nearby, vaporizing the trunks and showering the Astartes with ash and molten bark. Another struck the side of a hill, embedding itself halfway before detonating in a plume of earth and fire. Others never made it. He whispered a litany under his breath, a prayer for the fallen, names etched into his soul like scars. Hours later, the survivors had formed a perimeter. The clearing had become a war camp. Sparks flew as tech marines laboured over broken armour, forging fresh ceramite plates with field forges and plasma welders. Apothecaries moved among the wounded, sealing torn flesh with biogels and sacred unguents. Ammo belts were restocked, weapons cleaned, reloaded, and blessed. Around them, the forest loomed silent, as if nature itself feared to breathe. Varan stepped into the centre of the ring of warriors, his armour scorched and splattered with soot. His voice was low and hard. "Count." The apothecary didn't flinch. 312, my lord, out of 784. A pause, then Varan nodded. "Then 300 shall suffice. We are the Emperor's wrath. We are death incarnate, and this world will know it." Before another word could be spoken, the vox crackled, an eerie hiss, then a warbling static, like a whispering ghost in the machine. The nearest tech marine strode over, his servo arm unfolding from his backpack as he interfaced with the vox array. A cascade of encrypted code scrolled across his visor. "Intercepted enemy transmission," he said, voice mechanical. "Encrypted. Priority level maximum. "Decode it," Varan ordered. The Tech Marine's fingers danced across the interface. The Vox screamed briefly, then went silent. Data filled the screen. The Tech Marine's voice grew grim. "Deployment order. Elite reinforcements. Unit designation. Death Troopers. Full battalion strength. Landing coordinates locked. Estimated arrival within the hour." The Space Marines fell silent. Even the Space Wolves, who had joked and bared their fangs in the heat of war, grew solemn. The lead Imperial Star Destroyer, the Indomitable, drifted like a celestial executioner in high orbit. Beneath its vast hull, a secondary hangar bay opened, blacker than night, silent as the grave. Inside they stood, the Death Troopers. 7-foot-tall giants, encased in jet-black plastoid armor, so polished it seemed to drink the light. Their helms were skull-like, elongated visors without eyes, no mouth grills, just a faceless mask of death. Every surface was angular, aggressive, and devoid of any insignia. They bore no unit markings, no names, only silence. Their weapons were unlike those of standard stormtroopers. Sleek DLT-19X sniper blasters, rotary CR2s modified for anti-armor fire, and wrist-mounted vibro blades glinted under the bay lights. Each carried more than one weapon. Some bore plasma casters, others carried thermite breaching charges. Many had optical rigs and toxin canisters slotted into their armor. Every movement was precise, coordinated, inhuman. They did not speak, they did not breathe, they simply waited. The hangar lights dimmed as a single figure approached, a towering man in a dark grey admiral's uniform, draped in a black cloak. His eyes were cold, lips thin and cruel. He stood at the precipice of the drop bay, arms clasped behind his back. "These rebels still live," he said. His voice echoed across the hangar. "That is unacceptable." He turned to the lead Death Trooper, the only one marked by a crimson line along his helmet's side. "Deploy at full strength and eliminate them." No response. The Death Troopers moved in perfect unison. Not a single footstep was heard as they marched toward their assault craft. Sleek black shuttles armed with dual turbo lasers and drop pod deployment systems. Servitor crew loaded crates of munitions and body bags into the holds without question. Engines roared. Bay lights dropped to blood red. The shuttles lifted off one by one, disappearing into the void like daggers hurled from the hand of a vengeful god. The hunt had begun. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Brother Captain Varan stood atop a blasted ridge overlooking the clearing. His helmet was sealed now, auto sensors scanning infrared, ultraviolet and Vox spectrums. The scent of ozone lingered in the air. Behind him, Space Marines moved in disciplined silence, taking up defensive positions among the craters and scorched trees. "Enemy dropships inbound," the Tech Marine announced. Varan nodded. "Positions, eyes high, Vox discipline." Across the ridge, the salamanders and space wolves dug in. Heavy bolters were mounted between tree stumps, missile launchers locked in place, and power armor was resealed and blessed with whispered rites. Hundreds of eyes watched the skies. Then from the heavens they came. Sleek black transports broke through the cloud cover, screaming down like falling blades. Their hulls glinted with burnished armor, weapon emplacements mounted on every flank. Drop pods detached mid-air, slamming into the forest floor with deafening roars. The ground shook. Trees splintered. Smoke flooded the air. From the pods, they emerged. Death Troopers. They moved with a terrifying grace, unnatural, almost spectral. The Death Troopers dispersed instantly into flanking formations, vanishing into the smoke and shattered underbrush like black wraiths born of the shadows themselves. No words passed between them. Communication was a cold, silent calculus. Their armor absorbed every shard of light, swallowing it whole, leaving nothing but absolute darkness wherever they stepped. Their rifles did not thunder. They whispered death, barely audible shots that found their marks with deadly precision. Brother Curzon was the first to fall. A crimson tracer slipped past his shoulder pauldron, burning through armor and flesh with surgical efficiency. The bolt tore through his throat, and he collapsed, clutching his neck as a choking gurgle escaped his lips. No time to scream, no time to react. Snipers, targeting joints and visors. Varan's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. His gaze flicked wildly, seeking threats in the swirling smoke and flickering shadows. A sudden, horrific spray of ceramite shattered as Brother Levan's helmet erupted between the lenses. His body crumpled silently, gone before any of his squadmates could react. Kern's agonized howl pierced the din next as a bolt struck his exposed knee joint. The ancient servo hinge shattered, sending him tumbling to the earth. As he tried to rise, a hail of laser fire tore through his body, his armor splintering like glass beneath the relentless barrage. Adaptive targeting, Ulrich spat through clenched teeth, eyes blazing with rage. They're hunting us. Let's return the favor. Bolters roared to life, spitting death in violent bursts that tore through the blackened figures charging through the haze. A heavy bolter erupted from a thicket, the thunderous salvo shredding 2 death troopers mid-charge. Limbs and shards of armor flew like confetti, bodies crashing hard into the shattered remnants of trees. Another death trooper tried to close in on Brother Darius, who advanced with his thunderhammer crackling with raw, caged lightning. The trooper fired point blank into the Marine's chestplate. The scorching blasts pinged off the ceramite armor, unable to penetrate. With a roar, Darius swung his hammer in a mighty arc. Steel met bone and flesh in a sickening crunch. The trooper's body exploded into a grotesque spray of blackened armor and shattered stone, the forest floor smoking where he fell. On the ridge, the clash of weapons echoed through the trees. A space wolf, eyes wild with fury, charged headlong into a trio of death troopers. His frost axe whirled in lethal arcs, slicing through gun barrels and limbs alike. One trooper's blaster shattered in a shower of sparks as the axe cleaved through man and weapon in one savage stroke. Another tried to flank, but was seized by the wolf's powerful grasp and hurled into a thick trunk, his body cracking beneath the impact. Then came the moment that would be spoken of in reverent, growling tones for years to come. Brother Sergeant Maldrick pivoted sharply at the faintest whisper of movement. A death trooper had sprung from the canopy above, his vibro knife gleaming in a deadly arc aimed directly at his shoulder. The blade struck Maldrick's armor with a sharp crack. The vibro blade had shattered instantly against the reinforced ceramite. Maldrick twisted, chainsword hissing to life with a roar that cut through the tension. With a single brutal sweep, he bisected the assassin from hip to shoulder. The Death Trooper's body was split cleanly, smoking and sparking as the two halves collapsed to the forest floor. "Angels of death," Maldrick bellowed, voice echoing through the trees, fueling his brother's resolve. The battle raged on for what felt like an eternity, 20 minutes of relentless fury and unyielding determination. And then, a sudden eerie silence. Not one Death Trooper remained. Their bodies lay scattered across the shattered battlefield like broken marionettes, lifeless and still. Smoke curled from smouldering ceramite and scorched ground. The acrid scent of ozone, promethium, and blood hung heavy in the air. Brother Captain Varan stood amidst the ruin, his armour gouged and scorched, bolter clicking empty in his grip. Around him, his warriors gathered, bloodied, battered, but unbowed. "Status," he demanded. 24 casualties, the apothecary reported, voice steady despite the grim tally. "But the enemy is annihilated." Varan's eyes swept upward, toward the darkening sky above the shattered canopy. Above the Imperial Star Destroyer, Indomitable, Admiral Cale Varix stood rigid before the hololithic display, the flickering feed from the surface crackling with static before cutting out entirely. The last image seared itself into his mind. A Death Trooper's visor, cracked and sparking, a silent testament to their defeat. "All dead," murmured the lieutenant beside him, disbelief colouring his voice. "Sir, the entire battalion is gone." Varix's jaw clenched, cold fury flaring behind his eyes. "Initiate orbital bombardment." His voice was an icy command. "Burn the forest to glass. Leave nothing alive." "Targeting solutions locked," came the immediate reply. But then, "Sir!" An officer's urgent shout shattered the tense silence of the bridge, the words slicing through the mounting dread. "Multiple signatures detected, entering real space." Varix's head snapped up, eyes narrowing as alarm flared bright. "What is it? Identify." The lieutenant's gaze snapped toward the vast viewport, the stars stretching endlessly beyond the viewports like pinpricks of cold light. "Rebel vessels, sir. Numerous, dozens of them, jumping out of hyperspace just beyond the outer rim." Outside, the void suddenly exploded with brilliant streaks of light. One by one, sleek fighters tore through the darkness, X-wings slicing the silence with their signature roar, U-wings gliding with grim determination, and the towering silhouettes of Mon Calamari frigates emerging from the swirling haze of hyperspace. Each ship was a living promise of defiance, the rebellion's war fleet arriving like a thunderstorm on the horizon. The emptiness of space transformed into a shimmering battlefield, waiting to ignite. Alarms blared throughout the Indomitable, crimson lights casting frantic shadows across the tense faces of the crew. Turbo laser turrets pivoted, swiveling toward the sudden swarm with mechanical urgency. Cannons grinded into position to meet the storm. Suddenly, the starry blackness was torn apart as X-wings surged forward in tight formation, banking hard and releasing torrents of proton torpedoes. Explosions blossomed against the Indomitable's hull, fiery blossoms of orange and white that rocked the massive warship with thunderous impact. A pilot's voice crackled over the comms. "Red Squadron, stay sharp. We've got bogies incoming." One of the X-wings dipped low, the cockpit lights flickering in the dim glow. Inside, a small cylindrical droid blinked softly, its dome swiveling as it emitted a series of reassuring beeps. R2-D2. Silent, vigilant, a trusted companion in the heart of the rebellion's fight. Back on the Indomitable's bridge, Admiral Varix gritted his teeth, fists clenched at his side as the ship shuddered beneath the pounding assault. The battle for supremacy was no longer confined to the forest below. It had exploded into the stars above. Far below the orbital inferno, amid the shattered trees and smoking ruins of the forest, Brother Captain Varan stood with his squad. The first sharp echoes of the rebel fighters tore through the sky like war cries, distant yet unmistakable. He raised his eyes, scanning the rolling clouds that now glowed with the fire of distant explosions. He muttered, voice low but steady. Their arrival changes everything. Brother Halric's grim face hardened. They may be our allies in this fight, but we do not forget the cost of misplaced trust. Brother Darius nodded, gripping his thunderhammer tighter. We stand ready, vigilant. For allies or enemies, this battle is far from over. Varan's voice rose, resolute and clear above the rising wind and distant thunder. To war, he roared. In orbit above the forest world, chaos reigned. The Indomitable shook violently as a fresh volley of proton torpedoes slammed into her starboard flank. Fires spread along the outer hull, and entire sections vented into space, dragging unfortunate crew members into the void. Alarm klaxons howled as Admiral Cale Varix stood rigid on the command deck, gripping the edge of the hololith, as if his will alone could keep the ship intact. Shields failing, Admiral. They're at 17%, shouted a crew officer. Varix stared at the flickering readouts. Rebel vessels swarmed around them, Mon Calamari cruisers pinning them in a crossfire. We can't hold, sir. The fleet, Varix growled. Initiate emergency hyperspace jump. All hands brace. The stars elongated into streaks of light as the Indomitable vanished into hyperspace, a burning scar trailing in its wake. Aboard the lead U-wing, General Carlist Recon watched the retreating Star Destroyer vanish into the stars. Relief swept over him, but his eyes quickly turned back to the dense, smoke-choked forest below. Prepare for landing. Scanners show no enemy movement, just strange readings. Dozens of transports descended through the clearing skies, setting down in charred craters and broken glades. Ramp after ramp dropped with metallic hisses as rebel soldiers poured out, blasters raised. But the moment their boots hit the dirt, they stopped. The Astartes were waiting. 8-foot-tall giants stood in disciplined rows, armoured in ceramite. Bolters hummed with latent power. Their helms glared with inhuman menace, and every move they made carried the weight of living tanks. The rebels froze. Blasters were slowly raised, their fingers hovering over the triggers. A single wrong move could turn the clearing into a bloodbath. A voice crackled over the comms. We have contact. They're huge, armoured. Not Empire. Not anything we've ever seen. Brother Captain Varan stepped forward, his bolter lifted and ready. Then from the Salamander's line, a calm but thunderous voice called out. Enough. Brother Ethion scales of drakehide draped across his pauldron, stepped forward with open hands. "We seek no bloodshed. Take me to your leader." Rikan stepped forward slowly, flanked by rebel commandos. His eyes narrowed. "You're not Mandalorians?" The Space Marines glanced at each other. Varan responded. "We are Astartes, Adeptus Astartes, warriors from a realm far beyond your stars." "You're saying you're not from this galaxy?" Rikan asked. Ulrich of the Space Wolves laughed gruffly. "Finally, we were wondering when someone would figure that out." "We were attacked," Varan added, "by your empire. We defended ourselves. We seek no conquest." Rikan studied them warily. "Then perhaps we are not enemies." Rebel leaders and Space Marine captains sat around a war table. Holographic maps flickered, showing Star Destroyer vectors and scattered Imperial garrisons. Tension hung in the air like a storm cloud. General Rikan gestured to a projected visage of the Emperor. "This man, Palpatine, controls the entire galaxy. We give our lives, fighting to free it." Ulrich leaned in, fangs bared in a wolfish grin. "He sounds like a strong leader. Maybe your galaxy needs one." "He's no leader," Rikan said darkly. "He's a Sith, a wielder of the dark side. Rumors claim he commands death itself." The room shifted. Varan's voice was low. "Then he is touched by the warp." "Chaos," muttered Atheon. "It corrupts all, even distant stars, it seems." Darius slammed his thunderhammer against the ground. "Then he must be purged." Rikan nodded. "Then we have common cause?" He brought up a new display, the skeletal frame of a massive battle station under construction. "Our intel confirms it. A second Death Star. Larger, deadlier, still incomplete. We were en route to destroy it. We intercepted Imperial distress calls and diverted here." "Good," Varan said. "We strike while it's still vulnerable. We will help you, but in return, you will help us return to our galaxy." "We'll do what we can," Rikan promised. A new voice entered the tent. "If we're to win, we need more than just firepower." The Marines turned as Luke Skywalker entered. His presence was calm but resolute, a quiet strength in a storm. "We need hope." Varan studied him. "You are no ordinary soldier." Luke nodded. "I am a Jedi. I seek to redeem my father. I believe there is still good in him. If we can turn him, we can end the Emperor and the Empire." Silence. Then Maldrak spoke finally. "You believe this Vader can be saved?" Luke didn't hesitate. "I have to believe it." Ulrich rolled his eyes. "Well, I'd prefer he died screaming." But Varan nodded. "If he can be turned, he may prove a weapon against this dark Emperor. We will aid you, if you could bring us off this world." Rikan stood. "Then we move together." Rebel ships landed en masse. The Space Marines boarded in their hundreds, their massive frames dwarfing the rebel soldiers next to them. X-Wings were refueled, U-Wings prepared extraction. Tactical maps were updated. A chorus of hammers and prayers echoed from the Space Marines as they prepared for yet another battle. Far above them, in the darkness of space, Darth Sidious sat upon his throne, his fingers steepled, eyes glowing faintly beneath his hood. Vader knelt before him. "Strangers," the Emperor rasped. "Warriors beyond my sight, clad in armor I have never seen. They defeated the Death Troopers." Vader remained silent. "They are not of this galaxy," Sidious whispered. "But I feel it. Power writhing in them. Rage. Devotion. They reek of war and fire." "They were formidable," Vader replied. "But the fleet was disorganized. If we strike now..." "No," Sidious said with a sneer. "Let them come. Let them believe they have hope." He stood, lightning crackling faintly around his fingers. "You will capture one of these Astartes, alive. Bring them to me. I will unravel the secrets of their origin, and then I will turn them." Vader bowed his head. "As you command, my lord." The Emperor's eyes burned with madness and ambition. "They think they are angels of death, but soon they will kneel." Above the forest world, the rebel fleet was assembling. The stars shimmered with tension as Mon Calamari cruisers and Corellian corvettes glided through space like prowling beasts. The Space Marines stood aboard their assigned transports, motionless titans in prayer, while rebel techs scurried around them like ants. General Riken stood at the command table, staring at the holographic rendering of the Death Star 2, still under construction, its skeletal frame a crescent of doom hanging in orbit above the forest moon of Endor. "Scanners confirm it," a Mon Cal officer reported. "The shield is down, completely deactivated." "Could it be a power failure?" asked a junior officer. "No," muttered Brother Atheon of the Salamanders. The massive Marine stood tall, his drake-hide cloak billowing. "This is no accident." "It is a trap," Varan said coldly, folding his arms. "There is no way this Palpatine would leave such a weapon vulnerable." Ulrich of the Space Wolves grinned. "Then let them spring their little ambush. I'm tired of waiting. What's life without a fight?" "Reckless as always," Atheon muttered. "At least I'm honest," Ulrich replied. Riken looked between the warriors. "If it's a trap, we either spring it now, or we wait until that thing is fully operational." "Then we spring it," Varan said, stepping toward the boarding deck. "Better to die in fire than wait in fear." The rebel fleet approached in tight formation. X-Wings and B-Wings flanked the capital ships like darting wasps. Ahead loomed the massive bulk of the Death Star, its surface covered in scaffolding and exposed framework, like the bones of a slumbering leviathan. Turbo laser fire lanced out from the station, and a ring of Imperial Star Destroyers, but the barrage was oddly light, almost half-hearted. "This isn't right," muttered Admiral Akbar. "There's too little resistance." "All ships maintain course," Riken ordered. Dozens of dropships and U-Wings raced toward the surface. Aboard them, Space Marines stood silent, bolters locked and ready, each one of them a god of war. As the ships screamed toward the superstructure, Varan's voice echoed through Vox channels. "Brothers, this may be our last war, but we do not die with our backs to the enemy. We face them, bolter in hand, flame in our hearts." The drop ramps burst open as they land. and the Adeptus Astartes charged forward. The first squads breached into a cavernous hangar. Its walls were incomplete, scaffolds hanging like spiderwebs. Smoke drifted through the air. The air was sterile and dead. For hours, the strike force had plunged deeper into the skeletal heart of the second Death Star, its halls echoing with silence. The deeper they pushed, the stranger it felt. No alarms, no resistance, no signs of life. Even the ever-watchful machine spirits in the Space Marines' helmets pinged only void. They passed through towering fusion chambers with unlit plasma coils and silenced maglev trains. The only sound, their thunderous footfalls. The rebels fanned out cautiously, setting up relay beacons and scanner nodes. Despite the absence of contact, their fingers hovered nervously over triggers. Brother Hulric of the Space Wolves let out a low growl, his eyes narrow behind his lupine helm. "I can smell them," he said grimly. "They're here, in the walls. Cowards." Captain Varan raised his gauntlet, halting the column. Scans show this leads to the core's maintenance shaft, just beyond the primary gravitic substation. He stepped into the next chamber, a vast circular atrium like a colosseum of polished durasteel. Cranes and scaffolds stretched into the darkness above like skeletal limbs. The place reeked of industry and death. And then, with a hiss that soon became a roar, the blast doors slammed shut behind them. "Ambush!" thundered Darius, his thunderhammer igniting with electric fury. From above, stormtroopers erupted. Hatchways opened like eyes, platforms were extended, elevation shafts became channels of death. Hundreds, thousands. They descended like a white tidal wave, blasters raised in unison, moving with mechanical precision. It was a trap, and it had been waiting. But the Space Marines roared into war. Varan's chainsword ignited with a savage snarl as he charged into the nearest wall of white armor. The first stormtrooper was bisected at the waist. The second lost both his arms before his screams were drowned out by bolter fire. Varan spun again, his sword carving arcs of gore and flame. Nearby, Brother Atheon stood firm, his heavy melter humming like an angry god. With a burst of white-hot fury, he liquefied half a dozen troopers, the beam cutting through durasteel and flesh alike. A sergeant tried to raise a grenade launcher. Atheon turned and unleashed a second burst that vaporized the man and the wall behind him. Darius waded into the thick of them, like a living battering ram. His thunderhammer slammed down with a crack of thunder that shattered chests and sent bodies flying. Each impact sent shockwaves echoing off the walls. He caught a trooper mid-air, drove the hammer through his spine, then turned and crushed two more with a single arc. To the left, Hulric howled as he leapt from a scaffold and crashed into a full squad of troopers. His frost axe swept in wide, brutal arcs. Helmets were split. Limbs flew. Blood froze on contact with the weapon's edge. He laughed, feral and wild, even as blaster bolts scorched his armor. "More," he bellowed. "I thought this was a trap. Show me fear, little men." But they kept coming. Every corner opened. Every gantry deployed another squad. Fire teams were stacked behind crates, pouring concentrated fire into the rebels and Astartes alike. Blaster bolts streaked in endless red streams, burning through flesh, armour, and bone. The rebel infantry was the first to break. Pinned behind fallen crates and shattered consoles, they screamed as they died. Some disintegrated instantly. Others cried for medics that would never come. A Mon Calamari sergeant tried to rally his unit, only to vanish in a fireball of shrapnel. Sergeant Maldrak of the Salamanders grabbed a wounded trooper and hauled him behind cover with one hand, even as his flamer spewed a curtain of fire with the other. The front ranks of stormtroopers ignited like candles, but the tide never stopped. "Fall back," he shouted. "Fall back, damn you." Even the Astartes were being driven back. Brother Kassan, a Space Wolf berserker, had mounted himself atop a power cell and was raining down heavy bolter fire, each round detonating like a missile. But when his ammo drum ran dry, 5 stormtroopers charged him at once. He crushed one with a backhanded blow, but another shoved a thermal detonator under his chest plate. The blast tore through his torso. Kassan fell without a sound. Atheon turned and fired at the attackers, reducing them to ash. He knelt beside Kassan's shattered remains, then bowed his head for a brief moment before rising, vowing vengeance. Blasters struck the Space Marine's armour in dozens, hundreds. Ceramite plates blackened and cracked. Servo motors sparked. Helmets were shattered. Even their blessed warplate could not defy the laws of numbers forever. Varan, now wounded with a burn across his shoulder, shouted over the din. "Sector Gamma 3, there's a fallback point. Move." The Astartes began an organised retreat. Not a rout. Never a rout. They fired in precise volleys, covering each other's retreat with brutal efficiency. As they fell back into a side corridor, Maldrak slammed a melter bomb onto the bulkhead, igniting a roaring fire that incinerated a dozen stormtroopers and collapsed part of the entrance. The horde still came. Even maimed, even burning, they advanced without hesitation. The Marines and remaining rebels scrambled into a branching maintenance tunnel, a narrow choke point lined with pipes and exposed conduits. They set up firing positions. Atheon placed a flamer trap on the wall. They were bruised, bloodied, but alive. Varan looked around, panting, armour scorched. "We lost 3, he muttered. "Kassan, Volgan, Arcos. But many more rebels. More will die," Atheon said grimly, reloading his melter. "This is no fortress. It is a maze of death." Then a voice crackled over the vox. "Varan, this is Brother Tactical Squad Arcos. We're cut off. We went east, past the ion chamber. There's no sign of any others." "Hold position," Varan growled. "We'll regroup." "Negative," came Arcos's reply. "Something's here. We're not alone." Squad Arcos, 5 salamanders, their green armour now scorched and marked, advanced slowly through a vaulted chamber. Deeper than any they had passed. The light was dim. Their footsteps echoed. "Lights are failing," said Brother Nathak, checking his auspex. "Power drain, like something's feeding on it." Brother Arcos raised his hand. "Weapons up. This place reeks of chaos." The walls were oddly smooth, black, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Strange symbols had been etched into the bulkheads. Imperial basic, overlaid with something older, something wrong. Then the lights went out. Total darkness. Only the red glow of their visor optics remained. Then, a sound. Not natural. Breathing. Heavy and distorted. Slow and measured. "By Vulcan," whispered Brother Tellas. "What is—" A red line ignited in the dark. A lightsaber. The glow reflected against Arcos's green armor. The silhouette that held it stepped forward. Tall, monstrous, cloaked in black and masked. Darth Vader. The 5 salamanders leveled their bolters. "You are no servant of the Emperor," Arcos hissed. "No," Vader said. "I serve true power." Then he moved, faster than thought, a blur of black and crimson. The bolters were fired, their deafening roar rattling the walls. Explosive rounds burst before they could hit Vader's armor. They tried to fire again, but he was already inside their ranks. The first salamander fell with a slash through the chest. The second was hurled into the ceiling with a force choke. The third tried to fire point blank, but Vader wrenched the bolter from his hands, crushed it, and drove his saber through the Marine's throat. Arcos activated his power sword. "For Vulcan," he bellowed. Their blades met with a scream of energy, but the chamber was filled with darkness, with fury, with a hunger ancient and all-consuming. The world was on fire. Power sword met crimson blade in a storm of white-hot sparks. Brother Arcos of the Salamanders, war giant of Nocturne and forged in the fire of countless wars, drove forward with the wrath of a volcano. His armor, emerald green and battle-worn, gleamed with residual heat as each strike of his blade rang out like the hammer of a forge god. Each blow Arcos dealt was a statement of contempt, a rejection of the darkness that stood before him. His blade, glowing with power field disruption, clashed against the Sith Lord's lightsaber in a fury of heat and energy. The air shrieked with every impact. Scorch marks danced across the black walls of the Death Star's inner sanctum. Darth Vader reeled. For the first time in decades, the Dark Lord of the Sith was on the defensive. He moved with precision, parrying each devastating arc of Arcos's blade, but the sheer force behind every strike forced him to step back. His black armor sparked with each glancing blow. The very air around him trembled from the salamander's fury. The Sith's lightsaber hummed furiously, flickering as it struggled against the crackling edge of Arcos's power sword. Arcos was relentless. He pressed the advantage, stepping in with thunderous strides. Each movement was a blend of martial perfection and savage intent, forged by centuries of Astartes' combat doctrine. He struck high, then low, spinning into a brutal downward cleave that made Vader stagger as his saber caught the edge just in time. Sparks erupted in a shower of light. Smoke curled in the air, obscuring their clash like the breath of a dragon. "You are not the first heretic I have slain," Arcos roared, his voice booming through the vault like a cathedral bell. "And you shall not be the last." Vader remained silent. He pivoted around a wide slash, his saber sweeping upward to deflect a thrust aimed at his chest. He ducked as a brutal swing whistled inches above his head, cleaving through a steel support column behind him. The vault trembled. Metal screamed as molten debris rained to the floor. Arcos was faster than a being of his size had any right to be. Vader could feel it. Every movement was calculated, refined through a lifetime of war and duty. The Marine's strength was beyond any human opponent he had ever faced. Yet more than that, it was the discipline behind every strike that unnerved the Sith Lord. The next exchange came like a thunderclap. Arcos struck diagonally, then spun with the recoil to follow up with a horizontal slash. Vader barely caught both, sparks flaring between them. They locked blades, power sword against lightsaber, the energy fields grinding in a shrieking collision. Their faces were inches apart. Vader's mask reflected the glow of Arcos's burning eyes. "You are nothing, heretic," Arcos growled, his voice venom. Then, with an armored roar, Arcos slammed his elbow into the side of Vader's helmet. The Dark Lord staggered, his balance slipping. Arcos raised his blade for a two-handed executioner's strike, but the blade never fell. Vader didn't retreat. His saber dipped low, cutting beneath Arcos's guard, and slashed across the Marine's vambrace. Sparks and ceramite splinters flew. Arcos hissed, stepping back with a slight limp, his pauldron scorched. He growled and lunged again, but this time, Vader didn't engage. He simply extended his hand. The Force surged. Invisible energy slammed into Arcos like the fist of a god. The Astartes was hurled across the chamber, his massive frame striking the far wall with a deafening crack that bent the metal. His power pack sparked as he slid down, landing in a smoking heap. Before he could rise, the air thickened. His lungs froze. The Force wrapped around his throat like an iron noose. He thrashed wildly, clawing at his neck, his armor whining under the pressure. Lights inside his helmet flickered red. His power system struggled. The ancient spirits of his warplate screamed in protest. But Vader advanced slowly, deactivating his lightsaber. The only sound was his mechanical breathing, steady and cold. "You are strong," he said, voice rumbling like a collapsing star. "Loyal, unyielding. The Emperor was right. Your kind could serve a higher purpose." Arcos could barely speak. His vision narrowed. "Never," he growled, choking. Vader's hand clenched tighter. "You will learn." The blackness swallowed him. When Arcos awoke, it was to nothing but pain. Cold steel against his back. His limbs were restrained by Force bindings that hummed with anti-psyker interference. His armor had been removed. What remained were torn fragments of his black body glove, his torso covered in blood, burns and bruises. He was in a chamber of darkness. It clung to the air like oil. Strange machines blinked around him, twisted spires of Sith engineering humming with menace. Red symbols pulsed on the walls, runic, arcane. Screams echoed from somewhere beyond. Then it came, the laugh. Low at first, barely audible, a rasping exhale of glee. But it rose, crescendoing into a skin-peeling cackle that echoed through the dark like a knife dragged over bone. From the black mist, he emerged. A figure, hunched beneath heavy robes, moving with unnatural slowness and certainty, as if the darkness itself was bent to his will. His face was withered parchment, stretched over hate. Eyes like twin suns of ruin locked onto Arcos with predatory hunger. "Ah, the mighty warrior awakes," Emperor Palpatine purred, voice dripping bile. "A marvel, a monument of gene-forged faith and fire." He stepped closer. The light flickered. No, recoiled from his presence. "Such power," he whispered, eyes roving over Arcos's massive, wounded form. "And yet, so helpless." Arcos glared through the blood and sweat. His muscles bulged as he strained against his restraints. Servo tendons whined, plates ground, and sparks flickered. But the ancient Sith technology held firm, reinforced with dark science and arcane sorcery. "I will never serve you," Arcos snarled, voice hoarse but resolute. "You are rot given form." Palpatine's grin grew wider. It was not amusement. It was ownership. "Oh, but you will," he whispered, his voice dripping into something far colder. "They always do." He raised a gnarled hand and laid it against Arcos's bare, bruised chest. Pain, agony, fire and void. It was not electricity. It was something worse, something wrong. Power that crawled beneath the skin, burned through the soul, and tore at the very essence of what made Arcos, Arcos. His body convulsed, his mouth opened in a silent scream. Bolts of dark lightning danced across his chest, tracing sigils in charred skin. And the Emperor smiled. "You are the prototype," he whispered, savouring each and every syllable. "The first of a new breed, a legion of fire and terror, reborn in the crucible of the Sith. You will march not beneath your false Emperor's banner, but mine." Blood leaked from Arcos's gums, his vision blurred, edges dimming, but the fire in his soul burned hotter than ever. "I will never break." Palpatine tilted his head, looking at him as one might an unruly pet. "Oh, but you will. And when you do," he leaned closer, mouth inches from Arcos's ear, "you'll thank me." The words dripped like acid. Then he turned, black robes trailing behind him like smoke, his shadow impossibly large. "Begin the preparations," he ordered into the dark. With a mechanical whir, a medical droid floated into view, its surgical limbs extended like skeletal fingers, each tipped with syringes, drills, and cruel instruments too alien to name. The red glow of its optic sensors reflected off Arcos's eyes. He tensed, fought, strained, but even his Astartes' might, wrought through gene forging and centuries of war, could not shatter the bindings. "You cannot break me," he growled again, fangs bared in defiance. "I am the flame that does not die. I am—" The needle stabbed into his neck. A cold flood raced through his veins. Arcos screamed, body spasming, as his mind was forced open like a vault. Images bled in. Visions, nightmares. A galaxy on fire. His brothers dead. His hands painted in blood not his own. The voice of the Emperor, whispering promises. He screamed until he had no breath left. And through it all, the only answer was laughter. Smoke hung in the air. The surviving Space Marine leaders, Varan, Hulric, Atheon, Maldrak, and a scattering of rebel troopers regrouped in the maintenance tunnels. Their armour was scorched. The rebels scattered, yet their resolve was untouched. Varan paced before a holomap. We've confirmed the enemy's strength. At least 10,000 troopers stationed in choke points. They have heavy weapons and artillery. And this Vader, Atheon added grimly. He's mine, Hulric snarled. In time, Hulric. First, we must regroup with the other squads, Varan said. We launch a counterattack, hit their main force, break the trap. Then we carve our way into the command core. A rebel lieutenant blinked. That's suicide. Varan's eyes glowed behind his visor. No, it's vengeance. The metal walls groaned beneath the thunder of charging ceramite. The war horse of vengeance had sounded, and now the storm had come. Brother Varan's armoured gauntlet slammed against the bulkhead, his voice cutting through the voxnet like thunder. Squads Alpha through Delta, advance, but hold back full force. I want eyes on every deployment zone. Draw them out. Let them think we're desperate. There was no hesitation. The Adeptus Astartes surged forward, not as a full assault, but as a hammer test-driving the wall before the true strike. Smoke and fire filled the narrow tunnels as bolters barked and chainsaws revved their brutal song. The first wave was fast, violent, measured. Stormtrooper squads reacted with discipline, pushing forward through the tunnels in full force. But the Space Marines had what they wanted. A clear sense of the enemy's scale and tactics. Multiple regiments were being drawn toward the skirmish zones, entire wings of the Death Star's defensive force committed to a single, concentrated sector. The trap was set. Phase 2, Varan growled into the Vox, retreating behind the corner of a blast-scarred corridor. Fall back. Show them our backs. The Astartes began their calculated withdrawal. Flamers ceased. Chainswords went silent. Step by step, they gave ground, just enough to ignite the confidence of the Imperial garrison. The stormtroopers advanced, sensing victory. One commander barked for pursuit. Another ordered walkers forward. Reinforcements spilled from lifts and hatches, hundreds at a time. Their boots hammered like a war drum, echoing through the corridors. They had taken the bait. And then came Phase 3. Now! Varan's voice cracked like a whip through the Vox. The false retreat snapped like a coiled spring. Bolter fire erupted from ambush points. Plasma cannons turned corridors into blinding corridors of light. From concealed hatchways and upper gantries, Squads Bravo and Epsilon launched a pincer assault. A wall of Astartes slammed into the charging stormtroopers like a titanic avalanche. Brother Atheon unleashed his flamer again. This time, a sustained wave of screaming promethium that turned retreating squads into pillars of fire. His bellow echoed through the smoke. No mercy, no respite. Hulric, eyes blazing with the fury of betrayal and loss, charged through the inferno. His power axe whirled in arcs of blazing blue, cleaving armor, flesh, and bone in wide sweeps. He shattered a stormtrooper's helmet with a headbutt and tore through another line of troopers like a reaper harvesting wheat. For the Emperor, he roared, voice cracking stone. The stormtroopers broke. The illusion of discipline crumbled beneath the weight of their sheer terror. They fled, stumbling over one another, some throwing down their weapons, but death followed. Maldrak's plasma gun fired a superheated lance that incinerated a retreating walker. Its limbs melted as it toppled forward, crushing several troopers in a molten heap. In another hallway, Varan himself crushed a squad leader beneath his armoured boot, before detonating a frag grenade into a wall to open a new path forward. All across Sector Gamma 3, the Imperials fell. Screams of panic replaced tactical commands. Fear spread like fire through their ranks. And then the light changed. A brilliant flash. Green, focused, and calm amidst the carnage. He dropped into the chaos like a judgment from on high. Cloak billowing. Eyes resolute. Luke Skywalker. His green lightsaber ignited with a snap hiss that echoed louder than any bolter. The Jedi moved like wind and flame. Stormtroopers opened fire, but their bolts vanished into the blur of his blade. He struck low, leg sweep, then up, saber slice, disarming, disabling, overwhelming. 3 troopers rushed him. One was knocked out by a spinning kick. Another had his blaster sliced in half before a follow-up slash dropped him. The third fired wildly. Luke's hand rose, and with a flick of the Force, the trooper was sent flying into the opposite wall. He was grace incarnate. Fluid, swift, precise. Dozens fell before they even saw him move. He slid into position beside Varan as they pushed deeper into the central corridor, stepping over the smoke and wreckage of a fallen AT-ST. "You fight with fury," Luke said, never taking his eyes from the path ahead. Varan spared him a sideways glance, bolter smoking. "We are the Emperor's wrath." Luke's lightsaber pulsed, humming like a predator. They charged, side by side, one the product of centuries of war, the other the heir to a mystic legacy. Power armor and the Force, bolter and blade. Behind them, the Death Star shook as another support column detonated. The Marines and Rebel soldiers stormed through the breached checkpoint into the central core chamber, the heart of the Death Star. It was a massive vault, all obsidian plating and red-lit terminals. Dead tech priests and crushed officers lay strewn about where the Astartes had carved their path. The Death Star's core, a throne room of destruction, stood open before them. The console pulsed with ominous light. Rebel Captain Lena stepped forward, his eyes wide. "We can destroy it, rig the core, blow this station and end the Empire's terror." "No," Varan growled. Lena blinked. "What?" Ulrich stepped forward, his axe still dripping with blood. "You think too small. Why destroy the blade when we can wield it?" Varan gestured to the console. "We take this weapon, turn it against our foes. The Hive, Chaos, the traitor legions. The Death Star becomes our vengeance made manifest." "You'd use this planet killer," Lena stepped back. "We would purify worlds infected by the warp," Ulrich said. "We would burn heresy from the stars." Tension gripped the room. Rebels raised voices. Atheon and Maldrak stepped closer. The atmosphere sparked with unease. 2 ideologies colliding like tectonic plates. Then Luke gasped. His lightsaber dimmed. "I feel him," he whispered. Varan turned sharply. "Who?" Luke's voice shook. "Arcos, He's alive. In pain. He's close. Ulrich's fists clenched. Where is he? Luke closed his eyes. The Force surged around him like a rising tide. Below us. Deep. Some kind of torture chamber. He's surrounded by darkness. I can lead you there. Varan didn't hesitate. Squad Omega, with me. Lena, hold the core. Defend it at all costs. Lena looked uncertain. What if the Empire tries to retake it? Then you die on your feet, Ulrich growled. But you hold it. Deep below, the corridors were different. Ancient, cold. The very air hummed with malevolence. Pipes hissed. Lights flickered. Blood smeared the walls. The deeper they went, the darker it became. Luke moved like a blade, his saber lighting the path. Varan, Ulrich, and 4 other Marines followed in close formation. They passed discarded armor, green with salamander insignia. Arcos, Ulrich murmured. Luke paused. He's here. The door hissed open. Chains hung from the ceiling. Red symbols pulsed on the walls. Machines hissed with sinister intent. And in the center, Arcos was crucified, bound by Force restraints. His body was bloodied, his armor gone. Wires trailed from his arms. A medical droid loomed beside him, another syringe ready. Varan's roar shattered the silence. Arcos! But then came the cackling, a laugh that chilled blood. From the shadows stepped a figure in black robes. His face was a mask of withered malice, his eyes burning with unnatural fire. Sidious. He raised his hands, and lightning exploded. Varan was flung back, his armor sparking. He slammed into the far wall with a bone-crunching impact. The Marines opened fire, their bolters roaring. But the Emperor was already moving. Welcome, he sneered, lightning wreathing from his fingers. Welcome to the Empire. Bolters roared. The thunder of ceramite-clad fury lit the room with muzzle flares, each shot meant to end 1,000 lives. The Space Marines of Squad Omega advanced with military precision, their training honed over centuries of warfare. They were giants of gene-forged war, demigods in armor, armed with weapons that could tear tanks apart. But none of it mattered. Sidious moved like a shadow given flesh, a blur of darkness that laughed as the bolter rounds missed him by hair's breadths. His form seemed to dissolve into the gloom, reappearing between flashes of lightning. His laughter echoed, a mocking laugh. Is this the wrath of the Emperor of Man? How quaint. Brother Sarkin attempted to reposition. His heavy bolter barked a thunderous volley. Sidious appeared beside him, robes whipping as he raised both hands. Crack. A torrent of Force lightning surged forth, not the refined arcs of intimidation or pain. This was annihilation incarnate. The blast struck Sarkin full in the chest. For a second, he screamed. Then his armor buckled, boiled, split. His body disintegrated into ash and flame, reduced to scorched remnants within his power armor. The squad recoiled. Varan roared. "He is nothing but flesh and blood. Bring him down." They surged forward again, a wall of steel and rage. But Sidious was everywhere, a blur, a ghost. He leapt over one Marine, stabbing his hand through the air. That Marine's helmet imploded. Another was hurled against the wall with such force that his body left a crater. Lightning arced like a storm-given will. Sidious whirled to face Ulrich. The Space Marine bellowed with wrath. For Arcos. He charged with his power axe raised. Sidious sneered, and ignited 2 crimson sabres with a snap hiss. He met the charging Marine head-on. Sparks flew. Lightning crackled. Blade met blade and axe in an explosion of power. Ulrich's axe howled through the air, cleaving the air in arcs of vengeance. But Sidious danced backwards, his twin sabres a blur. He struck Ulrich across the chest with a cross slash. Sparks exploded, and the Marine staggered. But Ulrich endured. "I do not fall so easily, mutant." Sidious hissed like a serpent. "Then die slowly." He leapt into the air, whirling. His sabres flashed, and another Marine's head flew from his shoulders, trailing smoke. Another was impaled through the chest and tossed aside like a broken doll. In moments, Squad Omega was no more. Only 3 remained: Varan, Ulrich, and Luke. They stood back to back in the haze of smoke and ash. "We end this now," Varan growled. Luke nodded, his green sabre humming low. Together. Sidious stood before them, robes torn, his face twisted in fury. "You fools. I am the dark side. You are nothing." They charged. Luke moved first, fast as light, his sabre slashing low and wide. Sidious parried with one blade and hurled lightning with the other. Luke caught the bolts on his sabre, gritting his teeth against the struggle. Varan opened fire, point blank, but Sidious twisted sideways, barely avoiding the full force of the bolter shells. One clipped his shoulder, but merely a flesh wound. He shrieked, and the air filled with telekinetic shockwaves that hurled debris like shrapnel. Ulrich seized the moment. He slammed into Sidious from the side, driving him into the wall. His axe bit into the Sith Lord's ribs, but Sidious twisted, hissing, and plunged both his sabres into Ulrich's side before jumping over him with ease. Ulrich roared, the pain like a stimulant. He pushed through it, as blood poured from his side. His armour cracked and blackened, but his power axe still raised high. Sidious turned, anticipating him, but only barely. With a growl of fury, the Sith Lord met Ulrich's assault head-on. Their weapons clashed in a thunderous collision, red plasma against humming blue. Sparks lit the chamber like a dying star. Ulrich pressed hard, eyes wild with fury. But Sidious was fast, inhumanly fast. A flurry of kicks and saber strikes pushed Ulrich back. The Marine stumbled, his weapon barely holding the line, breath ragged as his chest plate smoked from a glancing hit. Sidious grinned. "You burn so beautifully." But then, Luke fell from above. The Jedi Knight descended in a blur of motion, green saber crashing down with righteous fury. Sidious snapped both blades up, blocking with crackling strength. But the force of the strike had sent him skidding backward, boots gouging trenches in the blood-soaked floor. Varan was behind him, silent, waiting. He lunged, wrapping both arms around the Emperor's body in a crushing grip, lifting him from the ground. Ceramite crushed flesh. Sidious writhed, lightning screaming from his fingers into Varan's side, tearing open circuits and sending bolts of agony through the Marine's organs. But Varan held tight, gritting his teeth through the pain, locking his limbs like a vice. The Emperor howled. "Now, Hulrik," Varan bellowed. Hulrik, staggering, burned, limped forward through the smoke and ruin. He raised his axe in both hands. Every step screamed with pain, but his grip never wavered. For the Emperor. The axe came down in a brutal, perfect arc. Sidious's head separated from his shoulders in a spray of fire and shadow. The air itself screamed, as though the void had been torn open. His body fell still. His lightsabers clattered to the floor with a final hiss. Darkness recoiled. The red glow of the chamber dimmed. The Emperor of the Sith was no more. A long silence settled, broken only by the hiss of ruptured pipes and the distant scream of alarms echoing through the Death Star's underbelly. Varan dropped to one knee, panting heavily, steam rising from his cracked armor. Luke stumbled to the medical console, green saber flashing once to cleave the droid apart in a single, merciful stroke. Hulrik limped forward, axe dragging behind him. His hands shook. His breath came in ragged gasps. Blood pooled beneath his boots. They gathered around the crucified form of Brother Arcos. He hung limp, arms stretched out, his body marked by torture beyond comprehension. His skin was torn, muscles bruised and exposed, his armor stripped away. Wires pierced his flesh. One eye was swollen shut. Blood clung to every inch of him. Varan reached up, hands trembling now, not from exhaustion, but from grief. "Brother," he whispered. Arcos stirred. Barely. A rasp of breath left his lips. "Still here." Luke and Hulrik began slicing the restraints, gently easing him down. His body was too broken to stand, but his spirit still burned. Hulrik lowered him to his knees, arms wrapped around his ruined torso, a quiet vow of vengeance unspoken. And then, the door hissed open. A gust of cold air rushed in. Smoke poured through the threshold, thick and black. Boots crunched forward. A breath, mechanical and deep, filled the silence like a thunderclap. Vader. The Dark Lord emerged from the smoke, like death incarnate, his red blade hissing to life in a line of molten crimson. His cloak billowed behind him, his eyes hidden beneath his black helmet, unreadable, unstoppable. Luke turned, stepping forward, his green saber raised. His voice was quiet, but resolute. "Father, please don't do this." But Vader said nothing. He advanced slowly, his saber held low. Varan pushed himself upright with all his strength. Hulrik cradled Arcos as he passed him off to Luke. The red blade lifted. "This ends now." He emerged from the smoke like the shadow of an empire. The red glow of his lightsaber split the haze, casting long, jagged lines across the scorched metal floor. Each step he took echoed like a war drum, slow and unrelenting. His cloak flared behind him, the silhouette of his obsidian armor flickering in the ruinous light like a phantom made flesh. The survivors turned. Luke took a step forward, his face a blend of pain, defiance, and sorrow. "Father." Vader stopped. His voice rolled forth, mechanical, guttural, yet beneath it, something sorrowful. Regret? Or only the illusion of it? "It is over. Sidious is dead. The throne is vacant. Join me, Luke." Luke's knuckles whitened around his lightsaber. "You know I can't." Vader stepped closer, the red of his saber casting long shadows across the blood-slicked floor. "I spared you. Again and again. I defied him for you. And now, he is gone. You saw to that. Together, we can restore order. No more lies, no more war. This ends with us." Varan stepped between them, massive and unwavering, steam hissing from the cracks in his ceramite armor. "You speak of endings, while standing on the bones of my brothers. You are no different than the one we killed, and you will fall just like him." Ulrich hefted his power axe, its edge crackling faintly with restrained energy. Blood seeped down his greaves, but he stood tall. "If you are the future," he growled, "then the future dies now." A long silence fell between them, charged like a storm held in suspension. Then Vader raised his saber. "So be it." The chamber erupted. Luke surged forward, his green blade igniting with a hiss, colliding with Vader's in a flash of light. The sound was thunderous, metal screaming against plasma, sparks flying like meteor showers. Vader answered with brutal power, his swings like hammer strikes, each one driving Luke backward, forcing him to pivot, duck, twist, just to stay alive. But Luke had grown. He danced on the edge of disaster, turning raw strength aside with precision, his green saber flowing like a river against Vader's relentless storm. Varan moved around the duel, his bolter pistol raised. With a roar, he let loose a volley of explosive rounds, each shot a thundercrack. Vader snapped his free hand toward the Marine, and the bolts froze mid-air, hanging like stars caught in time before erupting outward in every direction. One clipped the ceiling, raining sparks. Ulrich charged through the chaos. He let loose a roar that shook the walls, his power axe cleaving in a deadly arc. Vader disengaged from Luke with a twist of his blade and pivoted into Ulrich's assault. Red saber met the glowing blue edge with a crash that lit the room in searing light. The force of the blow sent a shockwave through the floor. Vader spun, using his superior reach and speed to counter, then delivered a crushing front kick to Ulrich's midsection. The Marine was hurled backward, armor scraping, sparks flying, until he slammed into a steel pillar that split down the middle from the impact. Luke was already on him again. He rained down strikes, his eyes blazing. His blade moved with fury, arcs of green fire aimed at his neck, shoulder, leg, and side. But Vader parried each one with precise, calculated motions. His own blade slammed against Luke's with an almost contemptuous rhythm. "You are stronger," Vader said, his tone unreadable beneath the mask. "But you still do not understand." "I understand enough," Luke snarled. "You're no different from the Emperor. He was weak, corrupted by fear. You can help me make something stronger. I won't become you." Crack. Vader unleashed a force blast with his offhand, hurling Luke across the chamber. He hit the ground, rolled, and skidded to a stop just inches from Arcos' motionless body. Vader roared and charged again. Ulrich, bleeding and coughing, rose again beside him. Together, they descended on Vader with fury. But Vader had had enough. He turned, extending both gloved hands. An invisible force slammed into the two warriors like an avalanche. Varan was lifted clean off his feet and hurled against the far wall. Ulrich was wrenched sideways, his armor shrieking as he slammed into a column. Both Marines were pinned like crucified giants, their limbs trembling, their armor cracking. They gasped, choking for air. Vader's fists clenched tighter. The force closed around their throats. Luke screamed. "No!" He rushed forward, saber raised, but Vader didn't turn. With a flick of his hand, Luke was thrown back again, crashing to the floor in a cloud of sparks and smoke. Arcos groaned beside him, barely conscious. Luke crawled toward the others, anguish written across every line of his face. "Stop. Please." Vader's voice was cold steel. "Then surrender. Lay down your blade, and I will spare them." Luke trembled. His hand hovered over his saber. The hum of it filled the silence like a heartbeat. Then slowly, he deactivated his lightsaber. The chamber fell quiet. He knelt. Vader turned. "Good," he said. "Now kneel fully and accept your place as my apprentice." Luke bowed his head, kneeling low. "I do." The grip around Varan and Ulrich loosened. They dropped like stones, coughing and heaving air. Their armor blackened, their bodies twitching with residual pain. Vader turned toward them, his voice now echoing with command. "The Emperor is dead. I rule now. You can serve me or die with the other relics of the past. Pledge yourselves to me, and your brothers may yet find a place in this new order." Silence. Then Ulrich began to laugh. Low, broken, furious. He spat blood onto the floor. "We serve only one Emperor." He stood beside Varan. "And he's back on Terra. And he looks nothing like you." They charged, their weapons raised, not just for survival, but vengeance. Vader moved with speed they could barely comprehend. The force slammed into them again. Another choke. But this time, there was no holding back. They hovered, twitching and groaning. Varan's voice barely escaped. "Now." And Arcos moved. Behind Vader, silent despite his wounds, he held one of Sidious's sabers, its red blade flaring to life. Before Vader could react, Arcos drove it forward, straight through his back. The blade erupted from Vader's chest in a gout of steam and red fire. Vader stiffened, loosening his grip on Varan and Ulrich. A long mechanical gasp rasped from his respirator. He sank to his knees. Arcos collapsed behind him. Vader's helmet turned slightly toward Luke. "My son." Then the light in his mask flickered and went out. He slumped to the ground, dead. Luke stood frozen in shock. The crackle of the extinguished red sabers still hummed faintly in the air, like the echo of a dying storm. His own lightsaber remained ignited, casting a green glow across his face, which was locked in a silent war between rage and sorrow. Sweat and ash clung to his skin. His breath had come shallow, uneven, like a man pulled between two different directions. Varan and Ulrich lay crumpled nearby, coughing, gasping, their battered armor dented and scorched. Around them, silence had reclaimed the chamber. No more blaster fire, no more explosions, only the faint hum of failing power cells and distant alarms. Luke took a step forward. His eyes never left the still form of Darth Vader, his father. The Sith Lord lay slumped in silence, steam hissing from the wound that had finally brought him down. The light in his mask had faded to nothing. He was no longer a symbol, no longer a shadow of fear. He was just a man in a broken machine. "You shouldn't have," Luke whispered, his voice cracked and trembling. The green blade in his hand flared brighter, as if feeding on the storm within him. He raised it slightly, his arms shaking. Grief rippled through him like a tide held back too long. His shadow stretched across Vader's armor, long and uncertain. The hum of Luke's lightsaber still echoed in the scorched silence. Vader's broken shell lay still, smoke curling from the gaping wound through his armor. The red of Sidious's saber dimmed in Arcos's dead grip. Luke's face was carved with anguish, his green blade shimmering like grief itself. Varan coughed and pushed himself upright, his ceramite armor groaning with every movement. He stepped cautiously toward Luke, helmet under one arm, sweat glistening on his scarred face. "He left us no choice." Luke didn't turn. "You stabbed him through the back," he said coldly. "He was my father. He was changing." Ulrich leaned on his axe, coughing blood but chuckling darkly. "He would have ripped us in half if we hadn't struck first." Varan raised a hand to silence Ulrich, then looked at Luke with the weary calm of a man who'd seen centuries of war. "I've seen men possessed by chaos. I've seen their minds rot behind their eyes while their bodies still walked. I have never seen one come back from it. Not once. Vader was not going to change." Luke turned, eyes burning with regret. Slowly, his saber hissed shut, green light fading. "Then what now?" Varan met his gaze. "You made a deal. You and your rebels agreed to help us return to our galaxy. That deal still stands." Luke exhaled slowly. The battle still raged in his heart, but he steadied himself. "I'll do what I can to help you, but this station must be destroyed. If we don't act fast, the remnants of the Empire will arrive. Varan frowned. We're not giving up this ship. Luke stepped forward. You can't be serious. We are. Until we return to the Imperium, this vessel is our only means of survival. It is our fortress, our ark. You'll just turn it into another weapon, another Death Star in new hands. You swore you weren't here to conquer, and we're not, but neither will we crawl into our graves for your ideals. Luke ignited his saber again. Then you're a traitor. Ulrich grinned, leveling his axe. And you are one man with a broken army. You don't have a choice, Jedi. Varan stepped forward between them, sensing the imminent conflict. Enough. We will not spill more blood today. Not yours, not ours. We seek no war with your rebellion. As long as you leave us in peace, we offer the same. Luke hesitated, then nodded slowly. What about the rebels on board? They will be escorted to their ships immediately. We will be in contact. We will need to discuss how to return to our world. Luke gave the body of his father one last look, then turned and walked away. Space Marines in green and grey armour stood watch as rebel soldiers were loaded onto transports. There were no words exchanged, just heavy gazes, mutual distrust, and the silence of an uneasy truce. As the last shuttle lifted off, Varan stood watching, arms crossed. Ulrich approached, wiping blood from his chin. They're gone. For now. 3 days later, in the Rebel Command's Outer Rim base, the war room glowed with blue holograms of the galaxy. Rebel leaders surrounded the table. Mon Mothma sat at the head, her face unreadable. The Emperor is dead. Darth Vader is dead. 2 tyrants have fallen. Cheers echoed around the chamber, but not from all. General Dodona frowned. What remains of the Empire will strike hard. We must be prepared. Admiral Akbar folded his arms. And what of these Space Marines, the ones who now control the Death Star? Silence. Leia spoke. They haven't been in contact yet. Hyperspace sensors showed that the station jumped somewhere into uncharted territory. They could return at any time, Dodona muttered. Or vanish forever, Mon Mothma added. We must hope for peace, but prepare for war. The Death Star hung in the void like a godless moon, colossal, silent, yet incomplete. Below, the dying star pulsed like a wounded heart, casting its dim red glow across the station's armoured surface. Where once there was ruin, now there was motion. Gargantuan repair cranes moved with the slow certainty of titans, extending from newly forged scaffolding to weld massive plates into place. Plasma torches blazed like miniature suns. Whole legions of workers, surviving stormtroopers, pressed into labour, flanked by towering Adeptus Astartes, worked in eerie harmony. Sparks rained like meteors as sections of the superlaser lens were hoisted and aligned. Alarms pulsed, metal shrieked, commands echoed in low Gothic, barked from helms that bore no compromise. The Death Star, once a symbol of tyranny, was being reborn, not by the hands of the Empire, but by something far older and far more dangerous. Where once the Emperor's throne room loomed in decadent arrogance, There now stood a hall of grim authority. Iron pillars carved with imperial Gothic iconography stretched toward a high vaulted ceiling. The floor was polished obsidian, veined with gold filigree, forming the sigils of the Imperium, the salamanders, and the space wolves. Massive banners, tattered but proud, hung beside salvaged imperial aquillas. At the centre of the chamber stood Varan, his green armour freshly repaired. He stared silently out the reinforced viewport at the stars beyond, vast, alien, and infinite. The doors parted with a hiss of hydraulics. Ulrich entered, his battered armour restored, his helm clipped to his belt, a grin curling beneath his scarred beard. "Repairs proceed faster than expected," Ulrich rumbled. "These troopers are obedient, terrified but willing, disciplined through fear, the way it always begins." Varan didn't turn. "Good. They'll live longer that way." Ulrich stepped beside him, eyes narrowing as he followed Varan's gaze into the endless abyss. Hard to believe this is the same galaxy. So small, so broken. "It is not ours to fix," Varan replied, voice calm but steel beneath. They stood in silence for a long moment, watching the skeletal arms of the Death Star stretch toward completion. "Do you trust the rebels?" Ulrich asked. "No," Varan said simply. "Then why let them go?" "Because this is not our war." Varan turned now, his face grave. "The Force, the Empire, the Rebellion. They are children playing with fire. Our duty lies elsewhere." Ulrich nodded slowly. "Our only duty is to return." Varan's voice softened, almost reverent. "We were sent here to die, brother, by forces unknown, cast into a rift no one expected to survive. But fate is a twisted thing. Instead of death, we found resurrection." He stepped toward the central table, once Palpatine's personal desk, now a strategic console ringed with hololithic projections of star systems, resource counts, and troop movements. "We carry with us a fortress the likes of which even the Emperor has never seen. The Imperium has many world killers, but none that are as mobile as this. Once we learn the secrets of its hyperspace technology, the Imperium can turn the tide against the Xenos and the heretics. It is a throne in its own right." Ulrich chuckled darkly. "Imagine the look on Guilliman's face when we arrive at Terra with this," Varan smirked. "It is a gift to the Emperor and to the Imperium, and it is our duty to ensure we make it back." The chamber darkened slightly as the dying star they orbited dimmed for a moment, casting the room into flickering crimson shadow. Varan turned again toward the stars. He picked up his helmet from the command table. Its surface was scarred. The eye lenses glowed faintly. "And what if they do not welcome us back?" he said. Ulrich tilted his head. "Then we remind them what we are," Varan said coldly. "We are the Forgotten Sons, the exiled, the ones who fought until the last shell, the ones who did not break." He donned his helm, locking it in place with a hiss. "We are vengeance. We are survival. We are the echo of every brother who died on 100 nameless worlds and was never mourned." "We are the damned," Ulrich said, "and we have returned."